So we actually kind of in real time decided to change the direction of what we were going to talk about, or that I was even going to get to ask Indy questions at all. And yesterday we spent a lot of time with rising generations and family office and investors, really hearing from Indy what he thinks about the future and what we can all do to make it better. But we really struggled with not leaving this opportunity to have Indy share some of his concerns, but also some of his amazing invitations for all of us to step into our greatness and to step into, I think Marcus from Intergen gave me this phrase, but radical revolution of collaboration. So Indy, can you share a little bit about what you see for our future and what, especially as rising generations or next gens, we can step up, and how can we all step up more?
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'm delighted everyone's here. I think there's a few things that are really important at this moment in time. Is that I think we have to be radically open to seeing the scale of the challenge. What I often sit in the rooms is that people sort of say, well, that's just too big. And I think one of the big things that's really important is stand up and look the challenge in the eyes. And when you look the challenge in the eyes, you start to see this, what it requires from all of us. And I think what it requires from all of us is actually, I think we're a generation that is equivalent to the World War II generation. It's an invitation of something extraordinary is going to be required from all of us. Now, why those two things are important, it also then requires us to understand the scale of the problem. And the scale of the problem isn't new products and services. It's not ethical chocolate bars, I'm really sorry to say, right? It's not even going to be a timber house. The scale of the problem isn't like we're not living at the age of new light bulbs being discovered. We're living in the age when we electrify cities. It's infrastructure level transformation. And we're so addicted into a 2004 culture of startups that we think the solution is another SaaS solution. And actually, one of the big transformations that we face is we're going to have to think not only at the infrastructure level, but more deeply, it's a deeper revolution of actually how we relate to the world. Because the world that we're living in is, and you're going to hear some brilliant speakers, like just to sort of put it into kind of concreteness, this shirt, it's not an expensive shirt. I don't tend to buy expensive shirts. Say it's £40, $60. The true cost of this shirt is between £250 to £450. So circa $400 to $600. That's the true cost. Between the £40 and the £450, that's all the cost that's externalized into the world. All the soil erosion, the water damage, the kind of inhuman conditions, that's the cost distributed into the world that I'm not paying. The moment we're living in is that distributed cost is no longer discountable. It's no longer ignorable. Those costs are feedbacking into us in things we call climate change, or microtoxins in your bloodstream, or actually inequality that's becoming so systemic that we're losing structural safety. The creation of more violence in the world around us, or air pollution. Air pollution, which means that actually your cognitive performance declines, or biologically, many other effects that are happening. So what's happened is we've been living in a world where we've externalized those costs, and now those costs are no longer ignorable, and they're feedbacking. Now, that's a negative side. The positive side of that is that feedback means that we've become entangled. As a civilization, we've become entangled. So when I talk about the iPhone is a planetary product. It's a product made as a function of the planet. And it's not only a planetary product, it's a product based on hundreds, if not thousands of years worth of thinking. It's a function of a planetary civilization. When you start to think like that, you start to see that we've already made a leap into a different type of organism. What we're struggling with is our institutions, our logic structures of ownership. The way we understand the world is outdated. We conceive the world through theories of ownership, and I'm going to put this really practically. Take this auditorium, right? Beautiful auditorium. It's a beautiful place, Austin. If I take this auditorium and I move it to the middle of Nova Scotia, somewhere smack bang in the middle of Nova Scotia, how much is the auditorium worth? Nothing. Because the auditorium's value comes from its relationality. Its relational relationship to Austin, the culture, the performers, the real estate, the people living nearby, all of that stuff makes the value. We have understood the value through the object as opposed to its relationality. Now that, you can apply that to your house. Your houses are really expensive. Again, I pick up your house, move it into the middle of Nova Scotia. How much is your house worth? Not much. The function of your house is a function not of its even material goods. There's material value. It's a function of its relational value. Labor markets, all these are schools, parks, quality of air, quality of weather. They don't belong to you. You're custodians of those relationships in that location. I know that's a really structural thing I'm pointing at. The reason why I'm pointing at it is not that it's right or wrong. I'm not making a moral judgment. I'm just trying to understand that we've moved into a different theory of organizing value. And in an entangled world, we're going to have to operationalize ourselves fundamentally differently. So really, the big philosophical transformation we're in is a new way of perceiving our relationship with the planet. And we've constructed the worldview over the last 400 years, which is about dominion, control, a control-oriented means of organizing the world. That world doesn't work. And now we're able to move into a different theory of organizing. And that, I think, is the extraordinary transition point. And the final point of hope I'd put in is that what is deeply extraordinary is, for the first time probably, we have 8 billion plus magnificent intelligences around the world, which are networked. We have machine systems which are making the planet self-aware. And we have actually, for a moment, we have an abundance of energy still in the system, hydrocarbon energy in the system, that's allowing this system to reach a chrysalis moment of transformation. So we live at both an extraordinary moment of a peak of human capacity that will enable a new opportunity. So yes, there are things that are on us, and I don't want to be delayed about them, right? We're almost certainly facing 3 degrees temperature rise, and anyone knows 3 degrees temperature rise? That means 5 degree in land, that means 8 degree in urban environments. We're facing massive systemic volatility. Our food systems become fragile. And those things are all coming at us, but they sit in parallel with an extraordinary capacity of actually us recognizing ourselves in a radically different way. Those two things coexist.
So, Indy, I think I was at the time trying to get an orange in when we were talking because I had forgotten to eat because I was so enamored with the intergen programming that was happening. But I believe David Chang brought up, but Indy, you know, if we do this conversation, how are we going to move people to change? And you told me, and David, you said, Chelsea, we just need 3. If we get 3, we get 6. If we get 6, we get enough. If we get enough people to create change, then everyone moves. So what is your hope for that change? What is the invitation that you have for all of us to step into our greatness, I think is what you called it?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 aspects of this, right? 3 aspects. One, I think we as a generation, okay, I'm going to unfold this properly. So let me box this out for you a little bit. I think we don't really have an alternative. So that's one thing I'm going to say. So when I spoke to some super wealthy people, and they sort of said, look, Indy, I got a house in New Zealand. And I said, okay, but New Zealand in COVID had not one paracetamol, couldn't produce antibiotics, doesn't have access to microchip production. What are you talking about? You have a house in New Zealand. Because we live on a planetary ecosystem, pretty much everything we're relying on is part of a planetary good. You want succession planning? Succession planning is not a house in New Zealand. Succession planning is aligning your investment to the succession of the planet. It's your number one objective if you want to preserve your wealth. Second, actually, the other box out strategy I get is that Indy, about 1 billion people the planet can afford to have about 1 billion people on it. And I say, well, okay, run the scenario. If we lose 7 billion people, the level of trauma we'll have set up in the world will almost certainly mean we won't stop at 7 billion people losses. The availability of bionuclear, any of the other weapon landscapes, we are into mutually assured destruction. So the choice we face, first choice we face, is mutually assured destruction or mutually assured thriving. And as someone said to me, Indy, even the Russians love their kids. Right? This is no longer a choice. It looks like a choice because people try to frame it that way. Look deeply at the problem, it's not a choice. And then the second part of this is that I think it's an extraordinary invitation. We are the most well-equipped moment in civilization to do an extraordinary move. Yet we've all become marginal players on the edge of the story. This is an invitation where the Constitution is written again. Let me put it through that landscape. It's that scale of invitation of a generation. Yet we like to play on the amendment sides of the story. And that's just to give it into that landscape. And the third thing I'd say is that I think we're already living in that future. We just have to recode the structures that we're operating in. This is not a product and solutions problem. It's going to mean recoding not only energy, nutrients, minerals, and the human development economy. So it's fundamentally like that. It's like the Industrial Revolution, all done again. Energy, materials, nutrients, and the human development economy. These foundations are going to be reimagined. But more importantly, I think we're going to have to re-examine our theory of property, our theory of labor, our theory of contract, and our theory of governance. And those structures, which were brilliant to get us here, allowed a lot of violence to happen as well, are going to have to be reimagined to be able to operationalize ourselves in a planetary level entanglement. And that is pretty extraordinary. So, it's your point. I think it's an invitation. And the final point is, how many months did it take for ChatGPT to have 20 million users? In COVID, how much time? We had universal basic income in Bangladesh in 2 weeks. It was deployed, not thought about, not policy. It was deployed in 2 weeks. We have a planetary diffusion capacity of unprecedented capability, right? This is no longer a diffusion capacity problem. It's actually a problem of understanding and being square with the problem and starting to talk about the scale of the challenge and the transformation that's required. And the final point I'd say is, and I think you're going to hear some from brilliant speakers like following me on talking about the flourishing network, we have to understand currently there's a fundamental problem in how we understand the world in terms of price and value. My shirt. My shirt is a function of externalizing costs. Unless we reconfigure our theory of price and value, we're going to externalize ourselves to self-termination. So we are going to have to reimagine how we create generative value in society. And the flourishing network work is, I think, really powerful and important part of that. So you're going to hear from some really good speakers that line that up. The final thing I'd say is, I think our theory of value will fundamentally shift. We're going to move towards intangible economies as being key functions. We're going to move towards generative economies being key functions of value. We're going to actually decentralize the production of money. We're going to do the collective intelligence of a city will be an asset. The decision-making capacity of a city will be an asset. Right? Trees won't be a liability. Trees will become an asset because they are. And we'll have to move beyond languages of assets to recognizing them as agents, right? As agents of systems. And that's a gift as a result of actually our computational capabilities. So we're living in a new bureaucratic age which opens up new possibilities. And that, I think, is an extraordinary moment.
Yes. Yes.
So in the very short duration of about the 48 hours I have gotten to know Indy, he's changed my mind on a variety of things. And it's reminded me of, with Logic Tree, what we're hoping to and what we hope you experience throughout the day is some perspectives you'll agree with, some perspectives you won't. But at a minimum, hopefully you'll leave today with questions about how we think, what we think we know, and what we can do about it. So the last thing in our few minutes left, I was the one championing community. I'm a community builder. We all need to be building communities, and not that that's wrong, but Indy shared the other day kind of his really unique perspective on that, and I watched everyone in the room just be like, oh. So I'm wondering if you'll share a little bit about that with this room as well.
Yeah, it's slightly controversial, but so I want you to. I think the moment we're living in is no longer about the individual, and nor is it about the collective, because both are bounded problems actors. They all create the other. If I see myself as an individual, I see you as the other. If I talk about I am part of this community, then I say you're not part of this community. Now, this is because actually the theory of property, whether private or commons, is always been built on the theory of boundary as a model of organizing. The corporate or the cooperative are all bounded systems. And as soon as you create the other, you create a permission for exploitation of the other, right? So the cooperatives in Mondragon, right? Beautiful cooperatives, one of the densest cooperative landscapes in the world. Actually, when they operate in India, they charge the same price as McKinsey's. Because they're cooperative to their economy inside, but as soon as they operate in the economy outside, they become extractive. Now, why I say this is important is because the cooperatives were born in a 19th century idea. They were an alternative to the idea of the distribution of value. But both of them operate in a theory of bounded models of thinking. So now, the challenge I place to you is, if we're a planetary entangled civilization, which we are, I would propose, then the theory of organizing has to be unbounded. And what I think, and this is some people in the room will get where I'm going, where if you look at on-chain organizing, any form of on-chain organizing, its real power is its unbounded means of organizing. It is not a boundary system. It is a protocol-driven entanglement system. And this is the power of money. Money is an unbounded organizing structure, right? It's the power of the internet. It's an unbounded organizing infrastructure. So I think the theory of community is actually as problematic as the theory of the individual. But what it does invite us to do is recognize ourselves through our interrelationships, our relationships of care. To be in communion is better than to be in community, because it's a verb, it's to be in relationship with. And I think the invitation for us is to be in communion, to be in relationship with. And that is actually allowing us to operate in an entangled world. And that requires us to be different, not actually bound ourselves in theories of community. And that, I think, is an extraordinary challenge, because our language isn't yet there. Now, where I'll sort of bring this, if we were being really honest with ourselves, I am a multitude of organisms. I'm not a single organism. That's biologically pretty true. It's also true, if you look at my psychology, is I am a multiplicity of personalities. I'm not a single personality. This is an illusion that we've constructed. In reality, we are all we, they, them. That is the biological reality. Then it's also true that my intelligence is not mine. It is in relationship. It's a function of dialogic capacity. And it's also true that I'm not a being, but I'm a becoming. I'm not an object, I'm a verb. Now, why this is important, this seems conceptual, but why this is important is when you shift these frames, you start to be differently. You start to become differently, because no longer are you trapped to preserve a singularity, a point of perspective. You're given the freedom to hold pluralities. And that is a new type of freedom. And I think one of the big challenges that we face is people are trapped. You stand in front of stages, the big thing people in the left and the progressive landscapes don't understand and don't talk about is how trapped people are. Trapped not just economically, but also psychologically. So what is a new thesis of freedom that we can release? A freedom to be radically human, radically humane. And this is a new politics in this landscape of operating in a new political theory, which allows us to recognize our entanglements, to be in relationships of care in radical different formats. And if we're going to make this transition, which is why I'm really grateful, Chelsea, for the work that you're doing, is the question for me about World Logic Day is how do we build the capacity not just for individuals, but all of society to be operationalized with a theory of logic? What does the institutions look like that allow logic to be the dominant form of discourse? What does that really mean when you have people in pretty serious poverty, when actually the decision-making frameworks don't have the privilege for this discussion? So what does it mean to build a society enabled to actually operationalize and process with logic? I think it's a really fundamental question for us to ask, because that's the next evolution of our capability and capacity as societies. And if we can achieve that, we're in a radical new planetary civilization. And that gift, that opportunity, is right here, right now, because we've been gifted huge energy boom to be able to bring us to this moment. But the invitation is now to embrace a new thesis of being human in a way that I think all the science is already there. But it requires us to embrace with courage a new position, a new positionality in the world, and embrace it with courage as the Renaissance invited us to reimagine ourselves then. So the revolution, if there is such a thing, is a revolution of reimagining ourselves. And then reimagining our language. And in that, we will reimagine our institutions and our theory of value and our theory of organizing. It is that deep-coded, and it's an invitation.
Thank you. Can we all thank Indy Johar one more time for being here?
Thank you.